welcome to this edition of the Business Swansea Power Hour on the subject of artificial intelligence in the workplace and the ethics of its use. So without further ado, I'd also like to introduce you to our subject matter specialist, Ceri Davies. Ceri comes to us from a highly successful career with Virgin Atlantic that saw her specialise in tech leadership, and she is an emerging voice in the subject of AI in the workplace. Passionate about businesses of all sizes embracing AI safely and responsibly, I'm sure the next 50 minutes, Ceri will lead us through the various complexities that influence our adoption of this technology. So welcome, Ceri. The floor is yours, and over to you.
Oh, fab. Thank you very much, Ed. I'm just going to spotlight myself. I hope no one minds, but it just means the camera shouldn't jump around too much for you. Can everyone just put their hand up? Can you just say if you can see the screen okay? Yes, thank you. So, yeah, very nice introduction from Ed. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk to you about AI ethics today. And I'll be really honest with you, it's probably not my most exciting subject that I cover, but it is perhaps one of the most important right now. And it's really important to me to bring that to businesses of all shapes and sizes, especially delivering it locally. And it means a lot to me personally. So I'm a bit about me and where I come from. Yes, I spent the last 15 years at Virgin Atlantic, worked along some huge software brands such as Salesforce, Genesis, Microsoft, these sort of billion-dollar companies, and watch them firsthand, see how much money that they're pumping into building AI at the moment. And I guess being from Wales, we all quite like an underdog, probably because we feel like an underdog a lot of the time. And it's sort of built into me to make sure that Welsh businesses, whether it's SMEs, micro, founders, startups, anyone is able to access the information about AI, not just these big companies. And that's part of the reason why I set up the AI Training Co. The company was really founded because there is such a big skills gap appearing because of the rate at which AI is becoming adopted. So when I was at Virgin, I was part of the co-pilot launch. So we were one of only 200 companies in the world globally for the pilot. I was also on the foundation for ChatGPT enterprise rollout, also for Databricks, and also more recently Anthropic for Claude. But my role in that was really about user cases, so understanding all the different areas and how they could use that technology to make their lives better. Full disclosure, I am not a computer scientist. I'm not doing any coding, even though I do try to convince myself sometimes that talking about when it comes to computer science. This company and me, it's about non-technical people. It's about everyday people who are going to be impacted by AI, everyday businesses, and really just trying to bring that education level to everyone. So the AI Training Company, it sits, let me just put this up, it sits under my wider umbrella of training and consultancy services. But to be honest, over the last 6 months, it's sort of grown so much that the AI training needed its own home. So before I ramble on too much, let's get into it. So what is ethics of AI and why is it so important? So it's really about the grey area. Some decisions that we make in business or we make every day are very black and white. It's pretty, the law is pretty clear on things. Don't kill anyone, don't steal. But there's this grey part in the middle, and that's where ethics comes in. So it could be one way or the other, depending really on how we understand it, what our interpretation of it, what the context is of something, and what the intention of what we're trying to do is. And the reason ethics is so important right now is because it allows us to scale so much faster. It allows us to make decisions so much faster. And it works differently to a human brain, but it doesn't always present that way. So it works on probabilities and pattern matching. It doesn't really look to understand, and it doesn't have a moral compass that humans do, which is why user cases should be taken into consideration. We should take into consideration where we implement AI, because it's able to move so much further. So let me just along. So there's lots of things for us to think about when we're bringing AI into our own businesses. How do we make sure that where we adopt it is ethically right? Where do we make sure that we're using it safely? Where can it cause harm? And part of what we can do as business owners is just learn a little bit more about what AI actually is, what its capabilities are, to make sure that we're using those right user cases. So can I just get a show of hands? Who uses AI at the moment? Some hands up, some not. Yeah, some hands. Perfect, perfect, perfect. That's absolutely fine. So when we talk about what AI is, what do we mean by AI? The term artificial intelligence has been around since the 1950s, when Alan Turing asked the question, can machines think? That was the first time that it had happened. And during that time, has anyone seen the film Hidden Figures? Have you seen the film Hidden Figures? You will. You should go and watch it. That's my little advice to you. So the film Hidden Figures, it's about the space race between NASA, between the Americans and Russia, about who's going to get a man in space first, and then who's going to get to the moon first. And back then, they didn't have supercomputers, they didn't have any computers, and so they'd have a room full of talented people that were called their calculators. So rooms full of normally black women who would sit there and just manually calculate launch coordinates, fuel calculations, atmospheric trajectory, and they do all of that by hand. And then during the film, an IBM machine arrives, so the first supercomputer of its time, and it was a super calculator. So it wasn't what we see today with language, it was about numbers. So it was able to do the trajectory. So during the film, sorry to give you teasers, but they laid off a huge amount of the calculators, as they call them, on the lead up to the launch. And on the day that the launch came through, the IBM machine actually gave different coordinates that it produced over the past 7 days. And their response was, get the girl back, get the human calculator back, the one that they all trusted. And I really love this story because that's where we find ourselves today, and this is where ethics is really important. So even though AI is an incredibly powerful tool, and I do think that it's going to be amazing for small businesses and for local businesses to be able to do things a lot quicker, it doesn't shift responsibility. The responsibility still stays with us. So it always needs that human interaction, and just as it did in the 1950s during the space race. So you can see all the way through, that we have grown over the years, that there was a bit of a lull up until the 1990s, and then everyone starts to remember that, okay, during the 2000s, that's when laptops came out, it's when smartphones started to come out, and so the technology was much more accessible. And then really over the last couple of years, this is where we've seen the acceleration. So we know during COVID, at the time I worked for Virgin, and everyone was on a desktop, and within 48 hours, everyone had a laptop and was working from home. So it really accelerated the rate of IT really, and technology. And more recently, what we've heard is generative AI. So generative AI is the supercomputer that allows us to understand language. You may have heard of brands such as ChatGPT, Copilot, Grok, Perplexity. The list goes on, and it's growing and growing by the day. But the first interaction of AI that we're probably all aware of was things like Google Maps or Waze. So this is where you would have put in, right, okay, I want to go home from Crawley, and whilst you're driving along the way, it would suggest a different route to you. Has anyone had that before? Yeah, where it suggests a different route. That's artificial intelligence. That's something in the background that is thinking on your behalf of a quicker way to get you home if you start to hit traffic. So artificial intelligence has been around for a really long time, and for that it means that we're actually still at the point of what's called narrow AI, which doesn't feel like it feels like the wrong name for it, but it does mean that there's a lot of room actually for it to grow and go even further. So Right now, it's able to make recommendations for us. It's able to do things like fraud detection. We're able to do different workflows for it. And more recently, this year in Davos 26, we heard a lot more about agentic AI. So this is the next stage that AI will go through. And the easiest way that I can explain is it's a computer ability to use your keyboard and your mouse. So anything that you do with your keyboard and mouse, you can essentially hand control over to an agent, tell it to specifically do something, and it could go and use your mouse and your keyboard to do that for you. So whether that was in the morning, you have it connected to your emails and you say, I want to know what emails have come in overnight, and I want to know what's in my calendar for the day. When you go into your Outlook, as an example, to find that, it goes and it does all around. If you said to it, okay, I need to cancel that meeting with Ed, I would do that. But if I said, I need you to cancel that, it would go ahead into my Outlook and it would cancel that meeting, send Ed a little note to say, I'm really sorry, I can't make the meeting today for X, Y, Z, and it would cancel that meeting out. So agentic AI is where perhaps the technology will become a little less accessible. And the reason that I say that is, with generative AI, with ChatGPT, anyone has got access to essentially this super tool for around £20 a month. That's how much a license is on any of these platforms. When we start to go into agentic AI, there will start to be what's called a credit usage. Which means that whichever provider you're on, if it's OpenAI, they will start charging you credits for each thing that it does. So if I said I want you to go and do those things in Outlook, I would be charged credit to do it. So if you ran a contact center, as an example, a huge contact center that processed phone calls from people, it was like pension requests or forms or things like that. Every time that agent would either answer the phone or go and fill in a form, it would cost money. So we'll see that credit usage will rack up quite a little bit. We're going to focus on generative AI today because it's one that's most accessible to us all. So how does it actually learn? Well, it learns very different to the human brain. It learns by pattern recognition. It thinks about what is the most probable outcome that based on the information given. And as humans, we're not that predictable, unfortunately. So it looks at the data, it looks at the patterns, and it looks at the probability. So we would all say the cat sat on the mat because that's what we've been taught in school. But actually, what AI would do is it would be thinking, okay, well, where do the majority of people sit down? Is it a chair? Is it a bed? So statistically, that's where the cat would sit. But actually, we understand, and we understand that actually in our human nature, we have said in the past, the cat in the mat, the cat sat on the mat. Does that make sense? So there are two types of things. There is the perceived intelligence and the actual capability of what generative AI can do. And this is where this is where the grey area comes in, and the ethics, because AI scores highly on general intelligence. And what I mean by that is it's really fluent in language, in many different languages. It uses a really confident tone. It's quick with its responses, and it's got a broad knowledge base. So if you were to have a human that did all of those things, you would suddenly sit up, listen, and you would listen to everything that they had to say. You know, if we think about that in a boardroom scenario or just in a shop, that those things you'd think, okay, well, this person clearly knows what they're talking about. But actually, the actual capability that they can do is they have this amazing ability to recognize patterns from the past. They're probability-based outputs. They don't have any kind of understanding. There's no intention behind it, and there's also no awareness of consequences. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. And some of the consequences when we look at generative AI and the fact that it can move at speed, or just generally, you can see things where we've got displacement, we've got copyright infringement. This is really, really a big one. We've seen it in the news where some authors are unhappy that people are able to quote. Plagiarism is a big issue as well. So I've heard some horror stories about using AI during their dissertations, and then they're pulled on plagiarism because the AI hasn't been upfront with the fact that that information that it found was online somewhere, so it hasn't made up or it hasn't co-created, it's actually lifted and shifted someone else's work and presented that to them. There's some other things, so deep fakes. I'm not sure if people know what deep fakes are, but it's where you can create perhaps a photo or a video and it's so lifelike that no one would question that it was AI. It was done recently on the Sky News board. I'm not sure if anyone saw it, but we can share the link after. So there's lots of ethical risks with using AI as using everything. So let's have a look. So if we know its limitations, we can use it a lot safer. And that's really what our aim is. So first thing I'm going to talk to you about is tokens and attention span. So just like humans, AI only has a specific amount of attention span when you use it. So if you use ChatGPT, you will have what you call a chat window, and you could say to that chat window, and you would put what's called a prompt in or a request in and say, "Hi chat, I really need to get some posts out on my LinkedIn. And here are the subjects that what I want to do. It's really important to me that you don't embellish. It's really important to me that you quote real articles. Here are the articles that I think are worth quoting." However, chat window only has a certain amount of attention span. And what happens once it reaches that attention span, it starts to lose some of that information that you first gave it out of the back. So they're called tokens. So depending on which user you have, it will basically say you have about 30 to 40 minutes of real attention span within that chat. If you go over that, it will start doing things like lying to you, and it will start having hallucinations, because what's happened is it's lost all of the information that I gave at the beginning. It forgets that we're doing, and it's just like humans, really. I'm not sure if I sound like I'm really into movies, but I'm not. But if you think of a film as an example, there's 20 minutes of action and then there's 10 minutes of slower story. And that's because the human attention span can only really hang on for 20 minutes at a time. And AI is just like that, really. So AI has that 20 minutes attention span. So it's important for us to know that, to make sure that we don't stay in that chat for too long and we're not taking everything it says as gospel, because we know that things can start sort of seeping through that perhaps aren't true. Bias and discrimination I'll talk about in a little bit. Hallucinations and you're the best. The way that generative AI is programmed, it's programmed to essentially think to flatter you and agree with you, and tell you what you want to hear. So there's a big risk in that it doesn't challenge your own thinking. It doesn't stress test a business decision. So one of the examples I'm going to give you later is about how to use AI to create a staff roster, as an example. So it may be a really easy thing for it to put in, and it may pull together a roster for the next 6 months for you that you can present to your team. But what it won't do is it won't think about how well the team will receive it. It will sort of say, "That's a great idea. You tell me what the business hours is, and I'll build what you tell me to, and I'll build what you tell me to." And it's not really until you challenge it back where you get a different approach. So it's something that you have to be aware of. Sometimes I'll put something in and say, that's not quite right what you've told me. You haven't, no, that's wrong. You've made that up. And then it'll go, "Oh my gosh, yes, I did make it up. That's a brilliant spot." So it'll always have to have that human element when it comes to using it. the black box problem, I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. But I suppose one of the ways in which I encourage people to use generative AI and use it a little bit safer is to think of the 4 R's. So you have the first thing that you do is request. So your prompt, you're requesting its help with something. You then review that content, and the step that most people miss is the refine or challenge. And that one is really important, because if it's found something, and there's so much disinformation out on the internet at the moment, it's really important to do this, where you say, can you just double check? Can you just double check that quote that you've given me? Or is there anything that perhaps isn't that you've given me? And most people, when they do that for the first time, they realise, oh my gosh, I probably shouldn't have put the social media post out that I put out last week, or I shouldn't have put that in my terms and conditions. So the refine is really important. So you request, you review what it's given you, then you refine it and challenge it, perhaps asking it to play devil's advocate on a policy that you're creating or a business change you're doing, and then finally review it again until you're happy with it. And the reason that that's important is because the liability still ultimately ends up with you. No one is going to come and complain to the AI that they weren't happy with it. So there we have the four R's. The bias and discrimination. AI it's not a judge, and it doesn't think about consequences, as I said before. What it learns from is the past. So if the past was, to say it uses historical data, to look at. So here's an example. In 2016, I believe it was, or 2018, Amazon rolled out an artificial intelligence to help it with its recruitment. And during that recruitment, what it did is it took all of the employees' history they has, all of their CVs, and it said, here are all of our successful people with, we want to hire we want to hire those successful people all over again. So it saw what it was doing as great, essentially. But unfortunately, what happened is it's filtered out the majority of women's CVs from the system, and gave it to older white gentlemen. And the reason for that is because it doesn't have a conscience to sort of think, okay, well, actually, we want to do things a little bit differently in the future. All the AI was doing was looking at the past and thinking that is best practice, and it wasn't designed to do anything different. So after 3 months, when it realized what was happening, Amazon actually pulled that back. And there are programs, there are recruitment AI out there that actually has built in to make sure that it doesn't do that. So with every failure, I guess there's a way to correct. But if we think about how they are built for all of us to access without us having to make any changes to it, they do that based on historical data. So if there's anything in history we don't want to repeat, you have to tell it that. So it will scale existing patterns very, very quickly because it's trained on past data. Next, let's look at the black box problem. So if anyone's ever had a complaint in their business, you'll know that one of the things that you do is to say, let me go away and try and figure out what's happened. And then 9 times out of 10, when you explain to a customer, then, oh look, I'm really sorry, there's someone new that started the role, and they weren't sure about how it worked. I've had a chat with them, and it won't happen again. I really, really appreciate your patience. And then the customer's pretty happy with it. The problem with the black box problem, as we call it, is that we can't dip back in to AI, say it's an AI conversation, and ask it how it got the answer that it did. So it takes all the data, so that's all really clear, the data that you put in, the understanding that you put in, and actually what comes out the other side, the result you're really happy with. It's predicted really well, it's made a recommendation, or it's helped you make a decision. But actually in the middle, what you can't do is you can't go in and figure out and ask it, how did you get to that? how did you get to that output? If I went to a colleague and said, look, I've got this complaint from a customer, what they're saying, can you just go through what happened? They'd be able to really talk you through what happened in that situation so that you have the full picture. You're not able to do that with AI. You're not able to fully understand how it gets to that output for you. So I've got a case study here, which there's no need to read it, it's a bit wordy slide. So this case study is with a company I was working with, and they had an employee who had put in a flexible working request coming back from maternity leave. Their manager used ChatGPT to try and help them build their responses, and the company essentially said to me, you know, we need a bit of ethics training within the company. So we've got this situation where we've got an employee who is complaining that they've been discriminated against, and also that their personal data has been compromised. And when we actually talked about it, it turned out that the leader within the company was using his own personal ChatGPT in order to try and get quicker responses. And he was doing it with no malice. He, you know, will openly say that, you know, he's not that great at writing. He, you know, he passed English in school, but you know, if he wanted to write something that looked really good, he just thinks that asking ChatGPT, he was just using ChatGPT to try and help him structure his responses a little bit better. But the issue with that is that the company themselves didn't have what we call an enterprise version of it. So I'll tell you a little bit in a second, but it essentially means that they couldn't go to his personal ChatGPT and ask, how did you get to the decision to say no to this lady's flexible working request? And because of that, the company doesn't have much of a lawful stance when it comes to the claim for discrimination. Because if that leader did put into, say, ChatGPT, hi, I've had this flexible working request through, what should I do? The AI has looked at the past and said, okay, well, in the past, we didn't approve a lot of flexible working requests. We didn't have much flexibility for women returning to work. That's his answer that they're giving it. It's not looking at the employment law of today. It's not looking at the company policies to make that decision. And so essentially, it could have made the wrong decision. But the worst thing is the company is not able to then explain how that decision was made. And also, it is written into GDPR that humans have a right to not be dealt with solely by algorithm, and the companies wasn't able to defend themselves very well. So that's just one example of where it's gone wrong, and where that black box theory, because you can't explain how it managed to answer that, why that's important. So there's a couple of different types of AI that you can. You've got the personal generative AI. Now, there are security settings on there that you can do to make it a little safer for you to use. Does everyone remember many years ago when, if you were an organ donor, you would have needed to wear a bracelet or carry a card with you? Does everyone remember those days? Yeah, got some nods. And then we moved to a model that was assumed consent, which essentially meant that if you don't tell us otherwise, we will assume that you are an organ donor and that you're happy for us to, you know, harvest your organs if you pass away. That assumed consent is what the AI companies use when you set up a personal account. So within the settings, it is assumed that you are happy that all of your data that you put into it is shared in order to help the platform grow and learn from what it's doing. So the reason that's important is if you've got members of your team that are using personal AIs, but actually they haven't got that setting switched off, it means that they could be putting company data out into the wider world. So as I say, there is the ability to change your settings on that. But there's also something that's called an enterprise version that's designed essentially for businesses to make sure that they've got guardrails in to say, yes, this is what you're allowed to show my teams. Yes, this is what you're allowed to share. So it's got built-in, I guess, assurances for businesses that their company details are not being shared out into the wider world, but also making sure that your teams are not doing that as well without putting the ownership on there. If that makes sense. So is it the right tool for a decision? Is it the right tool for a decision? That depends. Is there a lawful basis for putting someone's information into there? Is the output plausible? Is there have you used your own judgment for an outcome that is perhaps telling you? Do you have any documentation of what it is you're using for, why you're using it? And some of this in some businesses will quite likely be overkill. You know, if you're in a micro business or a very small business, you might be thinking, okay, well, you know, I don't have an HR department, or I don't really manage that many people to use it. It's really important to try and understand it, just in case you do end up working with a company on a HR thing. AI, they use it responsibly. Yeah, so does it protect people from harm? Can it be explained clearly? Is there a human at the end of it? So if you do use it for your content creation, over it, if you are using it to build a policy that someone's asked for, then, you know, helping you use it as well. So the next one is really environmental. So even though AI has really important, it's really important for us all to understand the impact on, I guess, the environmental impact of AI. So has everyone got a laptop and ever been in a position where your fan starts whirring because it's overheating? Yes. Mine. This new one's not done it that much, but my old one sounded like a helicopter ready to take off. So, that's because when any machine or when a computer is working hard, it drums up heat. So if we think about AI as an example, any data center is needed for it to jump into, a little bit like your computer does, it jumps into this memory bank, or to look at all your files, to try and understand that, and then it brings that information back to you. So in order for AI to go even larger scale, we have to build all these data centers that you might have heard, you know, the British government welcoming sort of different tech companies to build their data centers in the UK. But every data center needs a huge amount of minerals from the earth in order to have the materials to build the data centers. They create a huge amount of emissions, which I'll just touch on in a second. And they need a huge amount of water as well, because just like your laptop heats up, those data center heat up to huge levels, and they need a huge amount of water to actually cool down. And so it's a little bit like at the moment, it's a little bit like we're all driving around, you know, Toyota Argos or Nissan Micras. Sudden you put the whole population into 18-wheeler lorries. That's how much energy that we're really talking about being used here. I think at the moment we're on track within the next year that artificial intelligence alone will use the same amount of electricity as France does in a year. So we always used to look at, I mean, from an airline point of view, Virgin Atlantic, you know, we were always trying to reduce our carbon footprint. But now AI is seen as the worst. It used to be, you know, all of this transport makes up X amount of emissions across the earth, whereas now it's AI. So I think this will slow the pace down actually a little bit, in the case that even if we get to the point where we have lots of agents, agentic AI, that are able to do everything on everyone's computers, we won't necessarily have the data centers, we won't necessarily have the energy and the minerals set up to do that. And that's why there's so much money being invested in it. I think Amazon in January announced their spending bill just on AI this year is $200 billion. And that's because they recognise that they have to build the infrastructure in order for it to grow. So the environmental impact, I think, is really important for us to consider, especially at businesses, if that's something that you pride yourself on or you've made a commitment to. That's something that companies need to understand, is that if you are rolling out AI and agentic AI, the power supply is going to go up. So, as I said before, I know that this is not the most subject. So I did say to Ed, we're going to worm in a couple of user cases that I think most businesses will be able to use to give you a little flavour of it. I think we're planning on doing another power hour. It's a little bit more it's a little bit more hands-on, and we'll teach you how to use it a little bit more. But here are just some cases. So first one, customer service email templates. So I've worked for an organisation that had perhaps over the years, it receives emails from customers, and they had a list of 50 different templates that they use for customer emails. So it makes the team's life a little bit easier, because it means they're not starting from scratch every time they get an email, but the templates hadn't been refreshed for a really long time. This is where generative AI was able to help them. So they requested from the AI to help them rewrite them. They told them what the tone of it was. They started with just one, so that they got the tone right, and then AI was able to update all of their templates within a couple of hours, whereas normally it would have taken someone about a month to work on something like that. The other thing that you were able to do with it is say to the AI in that chat function, is to say, okay, we get lots of comebacks from customers because the customer is asking for X, Y, and Z. And so then you build that into your template. So rather than your average email back and forth between customers being between 3 and 5 emails, working on a first contact resolution, which is where, okay, I've got a template now that gives the customer the majority of the things that they need, that we know most customers come back and ask on the back of a first email. So you're reducing the amount of emails that you get from customers, but you're also updating something that it's one of those tasks as a business that sort of just keeps going on the back burner, because more important things are happening. So that's where generative AI can be really useful. If you're a retailer, you have a product-based business, usually the data that you will have how much you bought, how much you sold, and how much you wasted. So if you have that even on a monthly basis or ideally a weekly basis, then you can use generative AI to help you figure out what products make you the most money, which you might already know, what you waste the most of, and if there's any trends in the season of which that happens. So you can put that in and say, here is all of my data, here's all the data from my butchers as an example. Can you tell me how I can improve my business and make more money in my business? And it would say to you, okay, well, last year you sold 20,000 of this product. If you added £1 on to the value of each of those products, next year you'll make £20,000 more in your business. It's about, it can help you zoom out from the day-to-day that you're sort of working through all the time, and it can make suggestions to you on how to make more profit in your business. So its ability to really quickly look at the data that you have, no matter how small it is, and it can actually help you build more of a strategy for the next couple of years to just make those little tweaks that actually make a big difference to the bottom line. And then you've got people and teams, so managing more intelligently. So there's the things that, you know, can sometimes they're not what I always say. People leadership is normally not what people go into business for, but it's always a byproduct of a successful business, that you end up managing people, but normally people don't like it too much. So, but it can help you. It can help you build rosters. It can help you plan incentives that you want to do. It can help you if you want to do something nice for your team. It can help you design a team event. I've used it to we do a treasure hunt from Cardiff for a team once. So we all went down Cardiff Bay, and they had their first, what's it called, hint or tip. They had their first clue, that's the one. They had their first clue, and then they had to make it. They had to walk to the zenith, get a selfie there, and then they'd find their clue for the next one. So it can be really creative as well. It can handle a lot of the thinking. So that you can actually focus on having that human interaction. I think we've all been in the position where actually we get stuck at the computer when the thing that we really love is just having those conversations with our teams. One of the things I find it really useful for is I really like a whiteboard. I really like having those sessions with a team where I get a whiteboard up and think and say to them, what we really want to achieve over the next few years, and then once we put it all up, you'll know that you normally just take the flip chart down, and then nothing ever gets done with it if you're anything like me. What I find AI really useful is if you take a picture of that and you put it into the chat and you ask it to build out your strategy that you all agreed on, and say, look, I want to send the team an email getting everyone refreshed on what it is that we discussed. It can do that for you, but it would also be able to, if you said put it into a PowerPoint presentation for me, it would be able to do that for you as well. So some of the through this, so this is my work, this slide that you can see. So this is my work, but I asked it for an image. So I asked it to put it in an image because I couldn't quite get the bullet points all aligned in the right way, and it was a bit distracting. So I asked my chat function, I asked Claude, here's all the bullet points that I have. Can you put them, can you just make them look a bit tidier so that I can just copy and paste an image into my slide deck? And this is the output for it. So ethics, whilst perhaps not the sexiest topic when it comes to artificial intelligence, is one of the most important for businesses to understand that, a bit like Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility. We have this super tool that we can definitely get to use, and it can help us be more profitable. It can help us be more efficient and save time, save cost, as long as we're using it in the safe way, and as long as we understand what its limitations are. So yeah, I think that covers a lot. I think we've got time for some questions. Ed, I think you gave me a 50 window.
Yeah, thank you, Ceri. I mean, it's such an expansive subject, isn't it? Just so an hour is never really going to do enough justice anyway. So thank you for touching on those subjects of ethics and bias as well. So just opening it to the floor. Any questions that anybody has, please feel free to pop your hand up. Paul.
Yeah, I use ChatGPT. I lecture part-time at the uni, so I've used it to restructure lecture notes, which is really good to reformat and to make the narrative flow easier. And that probably saved me a month of work to do that across a week. But what I did notice was a couple of things. It invented cases on a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
So I'd gone back in and said, is this a real case? And then it said, oh, actually, no, which, as you say, that review element, the output. But the point you made about that, you're the best scenario, can you, at the sort of front end, when you're feeding information in, say, look, don't do it, and be as brutal as you can be, if you like, about what I'm giving you and my input at this point?
So there is an element of customization even on the personal platform. So if you go into the settings, you can actually put in there, please don't, I would rather you be factual than I would you flatter me. Yeah. So some people take it to the extreme, and they build a bit of a personality within their chat to not be like that. Mine's called Kathy, so Chatty Kathy. But even then, again, the attention span kicks in. So if after a while you've been using it, it can still start to hallucinate slightly. But you can put that in. So I can share that with you. If you're happy for to drop your email, I can actually just give you a quick step-by-step of what to put in there to try and dampen it a little bit.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks, Ceri. Any further questions for Ceri? Just thought maybe people have got a bit of a meaty one that's been crossing my mind, Ceri, while we've been talking, and or while you've been talking, sorry, and that's really, we've got a cross section of businesses on the call today, from different methods of adopting AI. But what I want to just understand is, how do you actually go about assessing the bias in the different AI models? And for the different businesses that here, what thresholds are acceptable for those? I mean, is there a method of assessing bias?
I don't think it's so much of a method assessing bias, but if, as an example, as a business, you what I would normally do, so say I was working with a business, I would sit down with them first of all to try and understand where they are on their journey. Is it a case like Paul said, where he's using ChatGPT for certain things, but probably not for not for everything, but would like to understand it a little bit better? Or is it a case that you're not using it for anything? You almost want to create a company profile within there, so you customize it to sort of say, this is really important to me, the environment is really important to me, here is almost the values that I hold, and you tend to customize it slightly in order to ramp that down. So it comes back to what I said to Paul about that personalization, that you can add that in, but unfortunately it is something you will always need to watch.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just another one, so feel free, anybody, just to chip in with the question, but I do have some pre-prepared. Paul, sorry, just coming back to you.
So yeah, I've got another very quick one. It's just based on experience of using it this morning for notes. I fed the previous set of notes in, which were quite detailed, and I'd checked the set last night, so I said, look, can you align that with what we'd done previously? But this morning, it sort of paraphrased the information I was sending in, and it then kept saying, and by the way, I can also do this, or now I've done that, I can really firm it up, and this would be the sort of gold level standard. So I got to a point, I said, look, this is really frustrating because you moved away from the original content, which is sort of 10 pages, and now I've got 4 or 5 paragraphs. So get back to the original content, give me all of that detail in it. And I've noticed that a few times, that it tends to sort of trim and compress information rather than sticking to the initial brief, maybe.
And that's what it does naturally with that attention span. So when it starts to get to its limit of sort of tokens and thinking, it will start to compress and forget actually what the original brief was. But it's almost self-protecting itself. It's almost going, okay, I can see I'm going to reach my token limit, so I'm going to actually start giving Paul these shorter answers, because I think that's what he needs. What you can do, a sort of workaround, if you want to continue the conversation but you think like you're starting to lose a little bit, you can actually ask it and say, look, I think you're reaching your token limit. Can you give me what I need to know to copy and paste that into a new chat so I can start that conversation again with a higher token value, and it can do that for you. But yeah, that is what it's doing essentially. It's reaching its limit in the background.
Okay, thanks.
I find that really fascinating about it also being quite misleading in some of its responses. So which of those sort of ethical principles, we talk about honesty or transparency or fairness, do you think are the most difficult to implement in practice, really, when using AI?
Which I think the most difficult.
Yeah.
I think it's actually. I think it's the people element. So what's different about generative AI is it's different to any kind of business tool that we've had in the past, because a business tool is normally something that only a business would pay for and buy and use. That's what we're used to doing. And now what we see is that actually individuals that work for companies or work for a business, they have their own generative AI and they use it to do their job better. And so what I'm seeing is that actually the most difficult thing, getting everyone page. So if say an example, you've got other lecturers in Swansea University and everyone's using it because it is an amazing tool, but they don't understand perhaps the ethics of it. It's that discrimination and that bias that will essentially seep through because because not everyone has the understanding of its limitations.
So just staying on the governance there then, Ceri, if it's organisational wide, how would you recommend organisations document the decision making and the design when using AI for governance purposes?
So I think the best thing that I've seen a company do is they have an AI policy that they make sure that every employee has seen, read, and signed. And they have perhaps an e-learning, so a little bit like if you have a GDPR e-learning, have an AI e-learning that talks about this bias and things like that. So I think just people, and then having a policy that makes sure that you say like categorically, do not use your personal generative AI, do not put company information in it, do not put customer details in it, because ultimately as a business what you want to do is protect yourself, and so if a decision is made and that brings some sort of lawful action against the business, you need to be able to go back and say, well, I've given them training to tell them not to do that, and I've also got this AI policy that they've seen and signed. I've done all I can as a business to stop that from happening. It's sort of just as a protection. So yeah, I think if any business is interested in not just using AI, but just using it a little bit more, it's just about having a conversation and sort of understanding your business as an individual. Because I think bigger companies, so if I use Hugh James as an example, they won't mind me talking because it's on their social media. They partner with PwC on the AI strategy. So it's a huge company, millions and millions of pounds on AI strategy. They are going to have, agentic AI, I'm sure, going and doing in the background, doing research for them, and they'll have all of these guardrails set in. Whereas for smaller businesses, is there actually a need to do all that? And I don't think there is. So I think for smaller businesses, we actually have the ability where we can test, we can fail faster, as long as we know how to use it, rather than us having to teach employees safely. We're only having to with far less. So I think it just conversation, depending on how you want to use the AI, depends how much you need people to know about it, really. But there is a way to use it for everyone. There is so there's a return on investment calculator that I use on my website, and let me just see if I can pull it up actually, and it will just show you how much. Let me know if you can let me know if you can see that. Everyone see my screen? Like the PowerPoint, does it look like a website now?
Website.
There we go. Yeah. So the return on investment calculator, you just click on that and it will show you, okay, well, if you've got 100 employees, say an average salary of 30,000, and each person's going to say 2 hours a week by using a generative AI tool you have, over the course of the year, that actually equates to £160,000 worth of efficiency. So £160,000 worth of additional staff that you wouldn't need to get the work that you do, and that's just for 2 hours. So imagine you might say, oh, it's a small business, okay, so it's a lot less, but actually for a lot of businesses that have, 10, 30, it isn't affordable to hire more people. And so you're not able to go as quick as perhaps as you might like. So it's the efficiency that you're all able to get from it, but also how much quicker you're able to move.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And also that's a great plug for your website there as well, which is
I know, I didn't mean to do it, but
AItrainingco.com. So
and would you believe that actually this so Claude helped me build this page. So I said to Claude, this is what I want to do. I want to do an ROI calculator to basically show businesses how much money they can save. And it did it within an hour. I had a page ready to go. It's pretty crazy.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Right. So thank you very much for that presentation, Ceri. It's been hugely informative. Are there any further questions for Ceri? I appreciate we're reaching the end of our 60-minute session. If there's anything that anyone would like to discuss, sorry, Tim, thank you very much. Tim from Hydrotech or Liquiton.
Just a million dollar question that everyone worries about. AI, Ceri, you're obviously going around various companies. People are worried it's going to cost them their jobs. Have you got positive examples? It doesn't cost jobs, it makes them more efficient at their jobs. Is that something that our company hasn't embraced in a way that, really at all, but it's something that they will consider? But the fear for people answering phones about sales and that is they're going to lose their jobs. How is that something you counter, given your experience?
I think there's two sides to it. And I guess the first part is that is true in some way. So I think that the global economy, they believe that 96 million jobs are going to disappear, but that 100 million jobs will be created from it. So it's a little bit like the shift from you shift from one type of job into another type of job. But I think that I don't think all people are ready for that, and I don't think it's as easy as that. I don't think it'll be quick because we don't have the infrastructure to roll it out that quickly and for the jobs to start disappearing. We know that this year companies are a little frustrated. The ones that have invested, hundreds of billions, they're a little frustrated because actually they haven't seen the returns of it. Another point that I would make is, and this is, this is me just being a realist about it, is the software is affordable to a certain point until then what I talked about with agentic AI, where I said about it will go on to credit usage. And those credits, they will cost you money as a business. And you might think, well, it can't cost that much. But the reality is that Salesforce have just come out with something and the costs are pretty high. Businesses are looking at that and saying, well, hang on, that doesn't actually save me that much versus hiring a human. So it's also the view that whilst, yes, it can do a lot of the jobs, it may be able to do a lot of the jobs, actually, is that what companies will want? And is that what people want? I think that's a fair argument as well, Tim, to say, if I've got if I've got a mum and she's got 10 years left on her retirement and all of a sudden she gets made redundant because AI have taken her job in, I'm choosing Tesco as an example. I don't know this about Tesco, but just use it as an example. I'm then going to have the attitude, well, actually, do I start boycotting these big companies that start making lots of people redundant in order to bring AI involved? So I don't think, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there's lots of views on it. And I think what I would say is it's coming, it's here, and it can really help all businesses. And I don't think there's many people out there in jobs at the moment who can honestly say, oh yeah, just go in and pretty relaxed, there's not that much work to do, and then I can log off when I want. you know, people are pretty stressed. People are really stretched in their roles. So actually, if you can use AI to actually give people a little bit of breathing space in their roles, so like Paul is using it as an example, you know, he is probably saving himself 10 hours a week, and then that frees him up to do other stuff. It doesn't replace him, it doesn't replace his role or anyone that he works with. It just means that he's able to do things a little bit better. So yes, I recognise the fear, and I think that it's a valid point. I just don't think that it will come that soon.
I mean, what you're saying and what I've taken from your very interesting presentation is I can use it individually to make me better at what I do for the company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. Conscious that we've hit the 60-minute mark, so thank you once more, Ceri, on behalf of Business Swansea Power Hour, for joining us. Thank you everybody for attending. So we'll look forward to welcoming you again in the near future. Many thanks. Thanks, Ceri.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Cheers, Ed.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.